There are many truths in Hollywood, rules both written and unwritten, that have served the studios well down through the years. Never put children in peril in a horror movie. Old ladies are funny when they swear. And you can always bring a character back for a sequel, even if they died on screen, are some of the most famous ones. But if I have a favorite rule, it's this. Everything, and I mean everything, is better with Muppets.
How would the bookkeepers like to be suddenly
unemployed?
This is my island in the sun.
I believe you've convinced them once again, Mr. Scrooge.
Maurice Joseph Micklewhite Jr. was born in Rotherhithe, London, England in 1933. The son of a charwoman and a fish market porter, Caine was one of the over 800,000 children evacuated from London during World War II. Following the war, his family was rehoused in a prefab home that had originally been manufactured in Canada. Remembering the house, he recalls that it was supposed to be a temporary home, while the bombed-out areas of London were rebuilt. But the family lived there for 18 years, and considered it a luxury after having previously been housed in a single small apartment with an outdoor toilet. Caine had his first experience on stage at the age of 10, playing the father in Cinderella. Appearing on stage with his Fly Undone, he got a huge laugh from the audience, and that laugh made him decide that he wanted a career in the theater. After finishing his schooling at the age of 16, he took on a number of jobs to help support the family, including working as a filing clerk and as a messenger for a film company. In 1952, Caine was called up to serve in the British Army and saw active duty in the Korean War. His brief stint there saw him in grave danger, but even so, he still advocates for a period of national service for young Britons, saying that, when done properly, service gives you a sense of belonging rather than a sense of violence. Caine returned from his stint in the Army and applied for a job with the Westminster Repertory Company as an assistant stage manager that also included the opportunity to play small walk-on roles. He started working under the name Michael White, which only lasted until he moved to London in 1954. His agent informed him then that there was another Michael White already acting in London, and that he would need to find a new name immediately. And upon seeing an ad for The Caine Mutiny playing at the Odeon Cinema, he told his agent he would now be working under the name Michael Caine. Caine would later joke that if he had only looked the other direction, he would have spent the rest of his career as Michael 101 Dalmatians. Caine formed tight friendships with the other young rising actors of the day, frequently being seen around London with Terence Stamp and Peter O'Toole. He would make his screen debut in 1956's A Hill in Korea, and the same year would appear in Jean Anouilh's The Lark for the BBC, his first credited television appearance. He became a frequent character actor on the BBC, appearing in small roles for television while still acting on the stage. He would finally see a breakout role in 1964's Zulu. He was suggested for the role by Stanley Baker, who had worked with him in A Hill in Korea 8 years prior, and who had found Caine again just as Caine was starting to get noticed in the press for his starring role in Next Time I'll Sing to You at the Criterion. Caine would go in to audition for the role of a Cockney private, but would wind up cast as an upper-class officer, which he credited to the fact that the director was American and didn't have the class prejudice that a British director would have had. Caine signed a 7-year contract with Embassy Films at the beginning of filming for Zulu, but as soon as the film was finished, he was released from the contract by Joseph E. Levine. The American producer and distributor told Caine that he didn't want to continue working with him because he felt that Caine looked queer on the screen, and yes, he was saying exactly what you suspect he was saying. Nevertheless, Caine continued picking up the role of Horatio for the BBC's Hamlet at Elsinore. While other English actors of the time worked hard to perfect their received pronunciation, Caine leaned into the Cockney accent that caused him to stand out from the rest, and won roles in The Ipcress Files and Alfie, the later of which earned him his first nomination for an Academy Award and made him a hot commodity in Hollywood. He would film his first movie in Hollywood in 1966, starring opposite Shirley MacLaine in Gambit. In 1975, Caine starred alongside Sean Connery in a movie that is one of my own personal problematic favorites, The Man Who Would Be King. Director John Huston praised Caine's work on the movie, calling him one of the most intelligent men among the artists I've known, and saying that Caine was one of the few actors that Huston had ever worked with that he felt comfortable allowing to improvise on camera. By the end of the 1970s, Caine was averaging 2 roles in major Hollywood productions every year, although he was also widely criticized for not being too selective of the roles he took. Caine himself likes to joke that this was definitely a period in which he was more concerned about the paycheck than about the script.
Actually, I'm here because I understand this is an equity production, as in guaranteed money. And I also love the theater.
Even so, his work in the early 80s would be critically praised, and he would win his first ever Academy Award for his performance in Hannah and Her Sisters. He would also appear in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with Steve Martin, which is just a great movie, guys. A brief lull in activity in the 90s gave way to a near non-stop string of roles throughout the 2000s and 2010s, including playing a starring role in the 2007 remake of Sleuth. He would take on the role originally played by Sir Laurence Olivier, and acting opposite him would be Jude Law, in a role originally played by Sir Michael Caine. Actors making cameos in remakes of their movies is a common occurrence, but only a handful of actors have taken on starring roles in both an original and a remake of the same movie. It was rumored in 2009 that Caine was retiring from the industry, but he denied the claims, saying, "You don't retire in this business, the business retires you." In addition to picking up the role of Batman's butler Alfred in Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, Caine has voiced Pixar and Disney films, acted opposite Leonardo DiCaprio and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and in 2015 joined the cast of the Kingsman franchise. At the time of this filming, it has been widely reported once again that Caine plans to retire, this time citing an interview in which he says that he has developed a passion for writing novels. However, his representative has once again issued statements denying that the star has any plans to bow out of acting. In 1990, the Muppets lost their creator and their chief creative officer when Jim Henson passed away. His sudden death from streptococcal toxic shock syndrome put a lot of the Muppets' business on hold and effectively ended negotiations with the Disney company, which had been close to finalizing a deal to purchase the franchise. However, Disney still maintained an interest in co-developing new projects. It was in the middle of this tumultuous time that talent agent Bill Haber approached Jim Henson's son Brian with an idea to use the Muppets in an adaptation of Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. With Brian Henson interested in working on the film, Haber pitched the idea to the ABC network as a TV movie and sold it to them. Jerry Jewell, who had previously been the head writer on The Muppet Show and had been involved in some capacity with the writing of every Muppet movie since the first one in 1979, was contracted to write the screenplay. Originally, it would take a form similar to a lot of Muppet adaptations, with all of the Muppets acting as a repertory troupe and assuming all of the roles, including the three spirits who visit Scrooge. This is still largely the case, with Kermit playing Bob Cratchit and Fozzie playing Old Fozziewig, among others. But early on, they made the decision to cast the three Christmas spirits with original puppets to better fit the ominous and spooky tone of the original story. With a completed script in hand, the Henson Company went to ABC for their final approval and left with a contract from Walt Disney Pictures to buy the script and produce it as a theatrical film. There is a long list of actors who were considered for the role of Ebenezer Scrooge, including Santa Advent Calendar alumnus Ron Moody and legendary stand-up comedian George Carlin. However, Michael Caine, upon learning that the movie was going to be shot in England, actively campaigned for the role, reportedly demanding that his agent badger Jim Henson Productions until they at least agreed to let him audition. Caine had long been a fan of the Muppets and regretted passing up an opportunity to film a guest spot for The Muppet Show, which he had missed out on because it was filmed in the UK, and at the time, Caine was living as a tax exile. But Caine had heard from his friends Sir Roger Moore, John Cleese, Peter Sellers, and Sylvester Stallone that the show was the most fun they had ever had filming a television appearance, and he had been eager to find an opportunity to work with the Henson Company ever since. Shortly after his hard-won meeting with Henson Productions, Caine was offered the role and reportedly told director Brian Henson, "I'm going to play this movie like I'm working with the Royal Shakespeare Company. I will never wink. I will never do anything Muppety. I am going to play Scrooge as if it is an utterly dramatic role, and there are no puppets around me." And Henson's response was,
"You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off."
That's since become one of the most famous anecdotes around the production of this film, and with good cause. What Michael Caine described is pretty much the perfect way to work with the Muppets, and is the attitude shared by all of the Muppets' best guest stars. Caine has since called this film his most memorable role. In order to allow Caine and the Muppets to appear in shots together, Caine walked across narrow wooden planks mounted several feet off the floor, and the street scenes were shot on a set that was built to decrease in size as it went away from the camera to increase the overall sense of depth and perspective. Caine loved his time on the set, and halfway through filming was reportedly surprised to learn that this film was Brian Henson's directorial debut, praising the young director's talent for filmmaking.
"Oh, please don't shout at me, sir. That and, of course, little Gwen. Her lungs aren't right. The doctor takes his share, don't he? I mean, you can yell and scream and you're right, but it won't do no good because I'm the stone you can't squeeze blood from, and that's the truth. Thank you for not shouting at me."
Caine has said that his take on Scrooge is based on Wall Street cheats and embezzlers, saying further that he thought they represented a very good picture of meanness and greed. It's hard to argue with the choice, as the first scenes of the movie present us with arguably the most coldly indifferent Scrooge. It's not that Scrooge has any particular cruelty, it's that he allows his distaste for anybody who is not Scrooge to blanket the world around him, resulting in a general atmosphere of cruelty that follows him like a fog, this is a Scrooge who will cut your throat for sixpence, and as he does so, you'll know that it's nothing personal. It's just that sixpence is sixpence. Even so, his Scrooge is one of the fastest Scrooges to buy into the ghosts he encounters. He's pretty much invested in what's going to happen from the moment that his dead partners, Jacob and Robert Marley, begin singing. And that in turn makes this Scrooge also one of the most lovable. He's indifferent and cold, but not necessarily unfeeling. And when he's presented with an opportunity to learn and to improve who he is, he's along for the ride from the very beginning of it all. He's not a Scrooge who turned his back on his fellow man, but one who lost his way somewhere without ever realizing that it had happened. And now he's ready to come back to the light. Disney Studios had high expectations for the Muppet Christmas Carol. It was their widest release of the holidays and the second widest release from the studio that year. But it faced stiff competition at the cinemas. On its opening weekend, it came in 6th at the box office, trailing behind Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, and another Disney production, Aladdin. Yes, Disney decided to compete with itself at the cinemas, and the Muppet Christmas Carol paid the price. Critical response was mixed, with some critics dismissing it as lightweight children's fare, and other critics complaining that it was too dark and grim for children. But even critics who did not care for the movie, such as Gene Siskel, who gave the movie a thumbs down, still praised Michael Caine for his performance in the lead. It was a modest success for the Walt Disney Company, bringing in over $32 million worldwide on an estimated budget of $12 million. But modest hits don't get massive investment in their follow-ups. The low numbers for the Muppet Christmas Carol's initial release meant lower budgets offered for future productions, including The Muppets Treasure Island. And it wasn't long before Disney stepped back from the Muppets in their business dealings, although, of course, Disney would return to the franchise in 2004 when they purchased the characters and trademarks outright from the Henson Company. In the years since its modest debut, The Muppet Christmas Carol would find its audience, becoming a Christmas tradition for many, and now thought of by audiences as one of the favorite Christmas Carol adaptations of all time. It has been reported that Disney is currently working on a 4K remaster of the film that will finally restore Belle's cut song, When Love Is Gone, which had been cut from the theatrical release by Jeffrey Katzenberg because he worried that it would bore young viewers. And if you're thinking, no, wait, I remember that song being in the movie, that's because you're probably among the many people who watched this movie on its original 1993 VHS and Laserdisc release, the only time previously that the movie has been released with that song included. Although if you have a recent DVD or Blu-ray release of the movie, you can watch the scene as a special feature separate from the main film. So what are your thoughts on Michael Caine as Ebenezer Scrooge? Drop down into the comments below and let me know. While you're down there, there's a subscribe button that you should really consider clicking on if you haven't already. There's also a like and a share button which can be used to share this video with your Muppet-loving friends. There are many of us. Until next time, I am Glenn Williams, the film optimist, reminding you to watch like it means something.